Continuing on to chapter 5, we get to the holiness of serving. Now, right off the bat, you might protest that the word holiness is not found in this chapter, and you would be right. But if you don't see that willingness to be as God wants you to be as holiness, then you're sadly missing the point. Yep. Missing the point of verse 2. Missing it since God is holy and dearly desires for you to be holy, as we read earlier in 1 Peter 1:16. Be holy, to be or not to be. Also, Peter is wanting you to be shepherds in that very same verse, as little as we understand that agrarian term. Or at the very least, wanting the elders to be proper shepherds and tenders of his lambs. Something Peter was needled about repeatedly by Jesus back in John 21, as you remember. Now, in regards to that serving as shepherds, this is a very special sort of serving that is suggested in this chapter. This is not about an overly generous serving of just about anyone with just about anything. That sort of serving is more of a social service to be expected from your local government, or a serving to be expected from your local food bank. Nor is this about guiding a pack of wolves who would rather eat you than look at you, or would rather eat you like a roaring lion, as we read in verse 8. Leave that sort of guiding to the Boy Scouts and Girl Guides. Rather, this is more of a guarding of God's flock in the truth, like a Sunday school teacher perhaps. We will see that aspect more profoundly in Peter's next letter. This is serving that may include serving a bunch of rather disparate and desperate folk the truth. Serving them Christ, serving them what they really, really need, not what they really, really want, as an improper shepherd would. Which may include serving godly folks that may have some very special needs. Folks that may have addictions, mental illness, or other developmental disabilities. Disabilities which prevent them from seeing the truth as clearly as they should. Quite understandably, those disabled folks, yes, or children, are not to be expected to pull themselves up by their own bootstraps, as you quite often hear from irresponsible preachers who do not understand the mockery going on in Luke 16. Those disabled folks often don't have bootstraps or the strength to pull them up in the first place, so that just telling them to pull up their bootstraps like a shrewd manager of themselves is simply cruel, when they can't even pull up their own socks. Instead, those godly folk are to be guided by your example, we read in verse 3. Guided as sheep are wont to be guided by your apparent holiness, guided by your apparent faith, hope, and love, guided by how you serve, as well as by what you serve. Unfortunately, John Vanier got a little sidetracked on who to serve as well as how to serve. Recently. He got a little sidetracked with those entrusted to him, leaving a far lesser legacy. And likewise, in his commentary, Luther accuses virtually all elders or bishops, yes, it's the same thing, in the Catholic Church of not serving the flock properly either, of pursuing dishonest gain instead. Even worse, insisting that no pope on record has ever served the gospel to God's flock. Insisting that no pope on record has ever preached the gospel of grace, which comes from the God of all grace, in verse 10. Not even his beloved Pope Gregory, who he admired. A pretty damning allegation coming from Martin Luther. Skipping ahead in Luther's commentary, we see Luther using his legendary "here I stand" phrase. Remember that one? Yeah. Using it with respect to that standing firm in the faith of verse 9. Defending his biblical position with, "This my God has said. On this I stand" phrase. A pretty solid basis for defending yourself, I'd say. Better than following cleverly devised stories, as we will read in our next letter. Then we have Peter defending his doctrine of suffering, once again, by insisting that this suffering will make you more strong, firm, and steadfast. Yeah, sweet. Whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right? Wrong. That's a really dumb saying. Why do we see so much debilitating PTSD then, right? And so many lawsuits then, right? Try telling that platitude to a rape victim and see if you don't get a strong backhand like you deserve. Instead, it all depends on where your strength comes from. And in this situation, it is a strength that comes from outside of you. It is a strength that God provides to you, as Peter mentioned in that fabulous doxology of last chapter. A strength that gets mentioned in a verse that Peter also speaks of serving. Just in case you think I'm taking this totally out of context. A strength that you will indeed receive when you cast all your anxiety upon him. We read in verse 7. Now, you think that's just a pious platitude? Okay, well, just try it and see if it isn't a truism. See, that casting seems to have worked pretty well for Bunyan, suffering some severe spiritual anxiety back in his day, when he returned to serious prayer and study of the Bible. And it seems to have worked for Peter too. Peter experienced a fair amount of spiritual anxiety in his day as well. And I expect prayer and study helped him considerably. With an omniscient God knowing exactly how much of that spiritual suffering to employ at the proper time, to drive you back to him, to return to him, as we mentioned earlier. And Peter is certainly not forgetting about being a witness to the constant spiritual sufferings of Christ here either, even if Peter wasn't an actual witness to his ultimate suffering on the cross. Still, Peter was a right proper witness at the right proper time, causing his very own petrifying brand of PTSD, if you really want to call it petrifying, or if you really want to call it a disorder. Yet, Peter is pretty big on order in this chapter too, ordering younger folks to submit to elder folks. Yeah. Verse 5, yes, that exceedingly difficult submit word again. With elders likely referring to those folks in charge in church, according to our commentators. Those kind of elders. Rather than referring to older, grayer, and possibly wiser folks. But once again, there are definite exceptions to that submitting to elders' rule. Otherwise, there would have been no Reformation. Now, as regards resisting the devil, verse 9. Well, Greedham's not so sure about this. He's thinking that you have to go to Paul for that resistance warfare. That you have to go to all of that metaphorical talk of weapons of war in Ephesians 6. But we have already been given those resistance weapons by Peter. Those weapons of faith, hope, and love that Peter and I keep harping on. We don't need to take a giant leap into the metaphors of someone else. Besides, I sort of like Peter's abstract nouns better. Besides, faith is clearly listed in that verse. So I'm standing my ground on that one. Standing on that abstract ground. Standing on the ground. But of course you're all wondering what that kiss of love is all about, right? That kiss of love in the final verse of Peter. 1 Peter. something Paul mentions several times. Did Peter mean a meaningless presidential handshake here? Between prime ministers, perhaps? Or, better yet, a warming Christian side hug? Oh, wasn't this just an abstract kiss? No, no, no. Few commentators want to go there, but it was a real kiss. Ew. Yeah, recent research has revealed that. And probably not the impersonal kissing on the cheek thing either. More like Isaiah getting kissed on the lips with a lump of burning coal, indicating some sort of a cleansing, some sort of a forgiveness. Yeah. There's a graphic I dug up on Paul and Peter kissing. Isn't that kind of neat? Yeah. Our Shriner is even brave enough to admit that the kiss of love probably was practiced during worship. During worship. In the ancient church. During worship. Yes, perhaps it was a reminder of being cleansed, as we will see in our next chapter, verse 9. Not only that, but it was even advised by Bunyan. Yes, by John Bunyan, to practice it. Oh, advised for John Bunyan to practice it in his more recent church. To practice it at the height of the Great Plague of England. Yeah, the Great Plague. More than the Spanish flu or this COVID virus we're experiencing now. Wow. Fortunately, Bunyan didn't practice it. Gross? Irreverent? Unsanitary? Nope. Handshakes are gross. Hands carry more germs than lips. So maybe it's something we ought to be doing for our Christian family, if it is holy, and if it is serving a godly purpose. If that's the case, then let's do it, says Piper, if you read his Just Ask John thing. Let's do it, despite our germophobic culture. Far better than fist pumps, according to Piper. Something not nearly as holy. May we be holy.